But I begin in Washington, D.C. with United States Senator John Thune. The Republican leadership's going over to meet with President Obama later in the week. Senator Thune, welcome and happy 4th of July week to you.
Happy 4th to you, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great. And I think you're back in D.C. Didn't you cancel your break so you could do Sense of the Senate's resolutions?
I did. I came back here so we could work on this, this really consequential Sense of the Senate that says that rich people should pay their fair share.
I don't understand. You guys invited the president to come last week, and he wouldn't come. Now you're going down to the White House to treat with him. Where are we in these negotiations? You're part of the leadership. What's happening?
I think we'll find out tomorrow, and if we don't get some kind of a breakthrough tomorrow, then I think that next week it's we'll go to Plan B. I think there's still some hope, and perhaps it's the smallest ray of hope that they can come to some agreement on this. But the fact of the matter is, Hugh, is you know, there are certain things that are not going to pass in the House and the Senate, and the president just refuses to accept that, and new tax hikes is not something that we can legislatively is going to get through the House or the Senate, and frankly, it's a bad policy. You don't want to raise taxes on job creators in the middle of an economic downturn.
Now, John Thune, some of your colleagues, Senators Cornyn and McCain, made comments over the weekend that the Obama allies in the media jumped on in an attempt to suggest that the Republicans in the Senate were coming apart at the seams over revenue enhancements. Did you listen to them, and did you hear that when they talked about what was going on?
No, I mean, I think if it's they as is always the case, selectively pull a few quotes out. But I think what everyone is saying is we are not going to expand government. We're not going to raise revenues. Now, if they want to talk about some tax provision changes that are revenue neutral, there may be some interest in that. But frankly, what we believe is that's going to happen in tax reform, which isn't going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks in the lead up to the debt limit. That's an issue that should be joined at some point. But right now, we need to focus on reducing spending, and that really is what can pass. Right now, the real issue here is legislative reality, and the president seems to be in denial that he can get some of these tax increases that he wants to get through passed in Congress, and that's not going to happen. So we have to deal with what we're dealing with in front of us now. We'll deal with the tax issues down the road, but they can't send tax increases to Congress right now and expect that we're going to be able to get a bill through here that increases the debt limit. It's got to be focused on spending, which is the real problem we have in this country.
Senator Thune, would you personally support anything that did not make a couple of $1 billion of cuts with no tax hikes in it?
Right. No, I can't. I mean, we've got to prove that we're serious. This is a serious issue requiring serious leadership, and we're not seeing that out of the White House. I think the president is deciding, at least so far he has, to take to choose the political route here and try and create an issue rather than come up with a solution. If he's serious about a solution, he'll decide to work with us and figure out how do we get a couple trillion dollars, I should say, in spending cuts included in this. If he insists on these tax increases that will kill jobs in the economy, then it's going to be very hard, I think, for us to be able to do business.
Looking down the road, today, Interior Secretary Ken Salazar ripped the House, your colleagues across the aisle, in which you were once a member, for putting restrictions on ESA, Endangered Species Act funding on new listings and critical habitat designation. I mean, just ripped them. And it says to me that executive branch is still not ready to come to grips with the fact there is no more money.
There's no more money, and the executive branch right now is out of control when it comes to all these new regulations that are increasing the cost of doing business in this country. I mean, I can't tell you how often I hear in South Dakota from small businesses and across the country about all these new regulations that keep being spun out of these agencies in Washington, D.C. This is the most aggressive overreach that I have ever seen, and it is making it more difficult for the economy to recover and to create jobs. And so I think that these cabinet secretaries and agency heads that come up here on Capitol Hill right now, in most cases, are on a mission to grow government, in many cases because they haven't been able to get their proposals through Congress.
Now, Senator Thune, let's talk a little politics. You heard my montage at the beginning of the program. By the way, are you going to compromise the National Weather Service like the president warned last week?
Jeez. Yeah, good question.
Sometimes I can't help but think he has no idea what he's reading on the prompter.
I think those are all idle threats. I mean, that's just that's a game. That's a game we're playing right now. That's a game we're dealing with.
Well, you thought long and hard about running for president, and you decided you wanted to spend years in the Senate and leadership, and you're moving up and all that stuff. But have you picked a candidate yet, and how do you look like the field as it's shaping up?
Well, I haven't endorsed anybody yet, Hugh, and I don't know if you have or not. But
no.
But I'm watching as the field develops, and I think we've got some terrific candidates out there. There will be plenty of options for Republican voters to choose from in the nominating process, and the important thing is that we elect a conservative who is electable in the fall election against Obama in 2012. And I think we'll have that candidate, and I think that the president, particularly with all the record that he has and all the policies that he's put in place that are literally not only bankrupting the country but driving the economy further into the ditch, is going to make him very, very vulnerable in a general election campaign. So I'm not behind anybody in particular yet, but I think we've got some good options to choose from.
Now, many people think this is going to be a purely economic election, but you spend a lot of time on foreign affairs. You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I'm looking at Syria and Egypt and thinking a year from now we may have incredible troubles in Egypt and we may not have come to the assistance of small d Democrats in Syria. What do you think?
Well, I think that the president is, like he's doing on the economy, is making it worse in terms of our foreign policy issues and posture around the world, and we could, in fact, be dealing with some of those issues. That could flare up at any time, depending on how these elections in Egypt go. But the Obama record on the economy, on foreign policy, in all these cases, I think is going to be very susceptible to criticism and contrast from a Republican candidate who is articulate and can get out there and talk about America's place in the world and what we ought to be doing to get people to back to work here at home. I mean, you've seen unemployment's gone up by 17%, gas prices are up 94%, the debt's up 35%, food stamp recipients are up 40%, health insurance premiums are up, and our standing abroad has gone down. So those are all, I think, very legitimate arguments to be made for our candidate when it comes to taking on this administration in 2012.
And that brings me, they've got a new foreign policy team with Leon Panetta at Defense and David General Petraeus going to the CIA. But there have been $400 billion in cuts, and now they're talking about more. Have we finished, in your opinion, cutting what can be cut from the Department of Defense?
I think you start getting down to where you're cutting into the bone, and that's not good. I mean, you have to have a capability to project power when necessary to protect America's vital national security interest. And I think that clearly the defense budget's always an easy target, particularly when liberals are in power. But you reach a point where this becomes no longer an argument about cutting this fat or cutting this excess, and you're really starting to cut into our, in a serious way, into our capability. And we have to be very, very careful because it is a dangerous world, and we shouldn't forget that. And the first job that we have is to defend this country. And I always say when if you don't get national security right, the rest is conversation. These other arguments and these other issues really don't matter all that much if we can't defend the country.
Senator John Thune, thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your week back from 4th of July one-day vacation as the Senate passes more resolutions.
Great to be with you, Hugh.
Thank you, Senator.